Millionaire sees his wife humiliating the new maid. But what he did shocked everyone. Richard Thompson was running late for an important meeting when he decided to go back to the mansion to fetch some forgotten documents. The 42-year-old businessman would never have imagined that those 5 minutes at home would completely change his view of the woman he had shared his life with for 8 years. It was when he heard the shouts coming from the garden that his heart froze. "You're trash, just like this filth you're carrying," screamed Jennifer, his wife, pointing her finger at the new maid. "You never should have been hired. Just look at the state of this house." Richard hid behind the living room curtains, watching the scene unfolding in the front garden of the mansion. Emily, the 28-year-old maid who had been hired just a week before, was carrying heavy trash bags while bowing her head, tears streaming silently down her face. Even so, there was something in her posture that demonstrated a dignity which intrigued the businessman. "Now you're going to learn what real humility is," continued Jennifer, with a cruelty Richard had never witnessed before. "Clean this floor with your bare hands, no gloves. I want to see you sweat." Richard's heart tightened, seeing the pure malice in his wife's green eyes. How had he never noticed that before? Jennifer, always so elegant in her emerald green dress and perfectly styled hair, seemed like a completely different person from the sweet woman he thought he knew. Emily knelt on the cold garden ground and began to clean with her bare hands, without question. Richard felt a lump in his throat, seeing the young woman's delicate hands getting dirty in the damp soil. There was something about her that didn't fit the position of a domestic worker. Her movements were too elegant, her posture too proud, even in the midst of humiliation. "Faster!" shouted Jennifer. "Do you think I'm paying you to dawdle?" It was then that Richard noticed something that disturbed him even more. Emily didn't just have tears of sadness on her face, but also a look of someone who had already been through a lot of suffering in life. This wasn't the first time she had faced humiliation, that was clear. Richard discreetly slipped out the back door and walked around the mansion, pretending he had just arrived. When he appeared in the garden, Jennifer quickly changed her posture, forcing a smile. "Hi, honey," she said with a sweet, melodious voice, completely different from the shouts Richard had heard. "You're early today." "I forgot some papers," replied Richard, watching Emily, who remained kneeling on the ground. "What's going on here?" "Nothing much," Jennifer shrugged. "Just teaching our new employees some cleaning techniques." Richard looked at Emily's dirty hands and felt his stomach turn. Discreetly, he left gloves and cleaning supplies on a nearby table, as if by coincidence. "Who left these things here?" asked Jennifer suspiciously when she saw the items. "Must have been one of the gardeners," lied Richard. "I'll go get my documents." Inside the house, Richard couldn't concentrate. The images of Jennifer's cruelty played in his head like a horror movie. How had he married someone like that? How had he never noticed? During dinner that night, he tried to broach the subject subtly. "How are the new employees adapting?" he asked, cutting the salmon on his plate. "Fine," Jennifer replied curtly. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I think it's important we treat the people who work for us well." Jennifer slammed her cutlery down hard, making a noise that echoed through the dining room. "Richard, you don't understand anything about running a household," she exploded. "If you're too soft, they'll walk all over you. You need to set boundaries from the start." "Boundaries are one thing, Jennifer. That's humiliation, plain and simple." "Humiliation?" she laughed bitterly. "You're being dramatic. It's just discipline." Richard realized it was no use pressing the matter at that moment. Jennifer was clearly on the defensive, but one thing was certain. He needed to find out more about that situation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a tremendous help for those of us just starting out. Now, back to the story. In the days that followed, Richard began paying closer attention to his wife's behavior with the staff, and what he discovered horrified him. Jennifer was systematically cruel to all of them, especially to Emily. It was on Wednesday of the following week that something extraordinary happened. Richard was in his home office when he heard Emily answering a phone call in the entry hall. To his surprise, she was speaking fluent English, then switched to Spanish and finally ended the conversation in French. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, when she noticed Richard had been listening. "It was a wrong number." "You speak 3 languages?" asked Richard, impressed. Emily blushed intensely as if she had been caught doing something wrong. Just a little of each, she murmured, trying to move away. Wait, said Richard gently. Where did you learn? In college, sir, she replied, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. What was your major? Emily hesitated for a long moment before answering. Business administration. A master's degree, too. Richard was dumbfounded. A woman with a master's degree working as a housemaid. There was definitely something very wrong with that story. May I ask what happened? How did you— I need to get back to work, sir, interrupted Emily, her eyes welling up. Mrs. Jennifer doesn't like it when we stop to chat. That night, Richard couldn't get the conversation out of his head. He decided to do some discreet research on Emily Roberts, the name that appeared on the documentation Jennifer had shown when she hired her. What he discovered shocked him deeply. Emily wasn't just a woman with a higher education. She had been a successful executive at a large company in Illinois until 3 years prior. The online news showed a confident, smiling woman receiving performance awards. What happened to you? Murmured Richard, looking at the pictures on his computer screen. The next morning, he found an opportunity to talk to Emily when Jennifer left for the beauty salon. Emily, may I speak with you for a moment? She looked at him suspiciously but nodded. I looked into your background yesterday, said Richard directly. I saw you were an executive. What happened? Emily's eyes filled with tears immediately. Sir, I need this job, she whispered. Please don't fire me. I'm not going to fire you. I just want to understand. Emily took a deep breath before speaking. My father became very ill 3 years ago. Cancer. Her voice broke. I spent all my savings on his treatment. I took out loans, sold my apartment, my car, everything. When he passed, I was broke and in debt. I lost my job because I couldn't concentrate. Since then, I take any honest work that comes my way. Richard felt his heart tighten. The story explained everything, the education, the posture, the dignity, even amidst the humiliations. Emily, you don't have to work as a housemaid. With your background— I tried, sir, she interrupted. I sent my resume to hundreds of companies. When they find out I'm in debt and have bad credit, no one wants to hire me. Mrs. Jennifer was the only one who gave me a chance. Does Jennifer know about your background? Emily nodded timidly. I told her when she hired me. I thought it was the honest thing to do. Richard felt a rage growing in his chest. Jennifer knew everything and still humiliated Emily in that way. In fact, she probably humiliated her precisely because she knew. Thank you for telling me, said Richard. And Emily, you're not alone, all right? When Jennifer returned from the salon, Richard was waiting for her in the living room. We need to talk, he said seriously. About what? Jennifer flopped onto the sofa, admiring her freshly done nails. About Emily. Jennifer's expression changed immediately. What about her? Did you know she has a master's degree in business administration? So what? Jennifer shrugged. A diploma doesn't clean a house. Jennifer, the young woman lost everything taking care of her sick father. You could have a little compassion. Compassion? Jennifer laughed cruelly. Richard, you are so naive. That's a very convenient story, don't you think? A beautiful, educated woman comes to work in your house full of sad stories to arouse pity. Are you suggesting she's lying? I'm suggesting you need to open your eyes, Jennifer replied coldly. Women like her are dangerous. They know exactly how to manipulate kind men like you. Richard fell silent, shocked by his wife's cynicism. How had he never noticed that hardness in Jennifer? Besides, she continued, if she really had a master's degree, she wouldn't be cleaning floors. She's clearly a liar. Richard left the room without answering. He was beginning to question if he really knew the woman he had married. In the following days, the tension in the house increased. Jennifer intensified the humiliations against Emily, as if she wanted to prove she was in charge. Richard, in turn, began to observe more closely and discreetly intervene when he could. It was during a charity gala they organized at the mansion that everything began to change for good. The event brought together the elite of New York to raise funds for an orphanage. Emily was helping to serve the guests, always discreet and efficient. Richard noticed that she moved through the party as if she were accustomed to that environment, not like a stranger. "Emily!" An elderly lady approached her near the bar. "My God, is it really you?" Richard saw Emily turn pale and whisper something to the lady, who immediately seemed to understand and moved away. But the pleading look Emily had directed at the woman did not go unnoticed by the businessman's watchful eyes. "Who was that lady?" Richard asked later, when he managed to speak with Emily alone. "I don't know, sir," she lied, avoiding his gaze. "She must have mistaken me for someone else." Richard didn't believe the answer, but he didn't press further. However, he discreetly approached the elderly lady during the party. "Excuse the intrusion," he said politely. "I saw that you know our employee, Emily." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Eleanor, became visibly uncomfortable. "It must have been a mistake," she said quickly. "I don't know anyone by that name." "Are you sure? It seemed like you knew each other well." Mrs. Eleanor looked him in the eyes for a long moment before sighing. "Young man, some stories are too sad to be told at a party. Perhaps it's best to leave the past where it is." "Mrs. Eleanor, I just want to help Emily. I can see she's suffering." "If you really want to help her," the lady said quietly, "look for Robert's Construction in Chicago. Ask what happened to the family 3 years ago. But prepare yourself for a story that will break your heart." That same night, as soon as the last guests had left, Richard locked himself in his office and began to research. What he discovered left him devastated. The Roberts family had been one of the most influential in Chicago, a construction company that had existed for 3 generations. Emily was the sole heir, being prepared to take over the business when everything fell apart. The family's trusted accountant had embezzled millions of dollars over the years, forging documents and creating shell companies. When the fraud was discovered, the company was completely bankrupt. The scandal was enormous, complete with newspaper headlines. Emily's father, devastated by the betrayal and the loss of everything he had built in his life, developed serious heart problems that evolved into cancer. The family lost not only the money, but also its reputation. Friends disappeared, doors closed. Richard found a photo of the accountant who had betrayed the family. His blood ran cold. It was Harold Wilson, the same man who had been the accountant for Jennifer's family years before. With trembling hands, Richard dug deeper. He discovered that Jennifer's family had also lost a lot of money to Harold Wilson, although they hadn't gone completely bankrupt. Jennifer's father had managed to partially recover, but the blow had been significant. "My God," murmured Richard, "they are victims of the same man." Suddenly, many things began to make sense. Jennifer's cruelty toward Emily perhaps wasn't just gratuitous malice. It could be that she knew exactly who Emily was and was taking out her anger for what had happened to her own family on her. Richard needed to discover the truth. The next morning, he confronted Jennifer directly. "You know who Emily is, don't you?" Jennifer was having coffee on the patio when he asked the question. Her hand trembled slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "What are you talking about?" "The Roberts family. Chicago. Harold Wilson." This time, Jennifer couldn't disguise her reaction. Her face turned pale and she dropped her cup, shattering it on the marble floor. "How did you find out?" she whispered. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you hired Emily knowing exactly who she was." "Why, Jennifer?" Jennifer stood up abruptly, walking over to the patio railing. She was silent for several minutes before answering. "You want to know the truth?" she said finally without turning around. "I lost my father because of Harold Wilson. Not because of the money, Richard. Because of the shame. Daddy never recovered from having trusted that man. He became depressed, started drinking, stopped eating properly. Within a year he was unrecognizable." Richard felt a lump in his throat. He was beginning to understand the pain behind Jennifer's cruelty. "When I saw the name Roberts on the resume that arrived here, I thought it was a coincidence," she continued. "But when she arrived and I realized who she was, all the anger I've felt over these years came back. It's as if the universe sent her here so you could get revenge," Richard finished for her. Jennifer finally turned around, tears in her eyes. "She is the daughter of the man who destroyed my family, Richard. How did you expect me to react?" "Emily didn't destroy your family, Jennifer," She was a victim just as much as you. In fact, she lost much more." "Lost more?" Jennifer laughed bitterly. "My father—" "Her father is gone too," Richard interrupted. "And she lost literally everything. You still have a mansion, money, a comfortable life. She is working as a housekeeper to pay off debts she didn't make." Jennifer fell silent, processing her husband's words. "Richard, you don't understand," she said finally. "For years, I dreamed of the day I could make the Roberts family pay for what happened. And now she is here, in my house, wearing my uniform, cleaning my floor. It's justice." "That's not justice, Jennifer. It's revenge. And revenge won't bring your father back." Richard left the patio feeling emotionally drained. He now understood Jennifer's behavior, but that didn't justify the cruelty. He needed to talk to Emily. He found her in the back garden, tending to the roses. There was something melancholy in the way she touched the petals, as if each flower brought back a painful memory. "Emily, I need to speak with you about something important," said Richard, approaching. She turned around and he noticed there were traces of recent tears on her face. "Has something happened, sir? I found out about Harold Wilson, about your family, about everything." Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if bracing for an impact. "Did Mrs. Jennifer tell you?" "Not directly, but I found out that her family was also harmed by the same man." Emily nodded sadly. "I knew," she said quietly. "I recognized the surname when I came to work here. I researched the Thompson family and discovered the connection. That's why I took the job, even knowing it would be difficult." Richard was confused. "Why would you do that knowing Jennifer had reasons to hate you?" "Because I feel guilty," replied Emily, her voice choked. "My father trusted Harold blindly. He saw him as a son. If Dad had been more careful, more suspicious, maybe he could have uncovered the fraud sooner and prevented other families from being harmed." "Emily, you are not at all to blame for what happened." "Yes, I am." She shook her head vigorously. "I worked at the company. I should have noticed something. I should have questioned some numbers that didn't add up. But I trusted Harold as much as my father did." "He was a professional criminal, Emily. He deceived experienced people for years. That doesn't lessen my responsibility," she said, with a determination that surprised Richard. "That's why I accepted the job here. If Mrs. Jennifer needs to take her pain out on me, I understand. It's the least I can do to try and make up for the harm my family caused." Richard was shocked by the young woman's nobility of spirit. While Jennifer was consumed by revenge, Emily carried a burden of guilt that shouldn't even be hers. "Emily, you are punishing yourself for something you didn't do. That's not fair." "Fair?" She smiled sadly. "Mr. Richard, if there is justice in this world, it's very different from what I imagined. Honest families lose everything, while criminals disappear with the money. Daughters pay for their father's mistakes, wives take out their anger for others on innocent people." Richard felt his heart tighten with Emily's melancholy wisdom. "Even so, you don't deserve to be treated the way Jennifer has been treating you." "Everyone deals with pain in their own way, sir. Mrs. Jennifer chose anger. I chose acceptance." In that moment, Richard knew he was in the presence of one of the most extraordinary people he had ever met. Emily's inner strength was something rare and precious. "There's something you need to know," he said. "Jennifer didn't hire you by chance. She knew exactly who you were from the beginning." Emily didn't seem surprised. "I imagined as much," she said simply. "No one hires a maid without checking references, and when she discovered my background, instead of firing me or giving me other duties, she intensified the humiliations. It wasn't hard to connect the dots." "And yet you stayed." "Mr. Richard, I don't have many options in life right now, and besides—" She hesitated before continuing. "Perhaps Mrs. Jennifer needs this to be able to move on. If my suffering can help ease her pain, then maybe it was worth it." Richard was silent for a long moment, admiring Emily's emotional maturity. She had found a purpose even in her own humiliation. "You are a very special person, Emily," he said finally. "And I will find a way to resolve this situation. I promise you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a great help to us as we're just getting started. Now back to the story. Richard spent the following days thinking about how he could help both Emily and Jennifer overcome that situation. It was clear that both were victims, each dealing with the trauma in different and destructive ways. That's when he had an idea. Richard had a lawyer friend who specialized in recovering assets from financial fraud. If there was any chance of recovering some of the money stolen by Harold Wilson, that could be the first step toward healing for both women. Without telling anyone, Richard hired the lawyer's services and put private detectives on the search for Harold Wilson. If he couldn't recover the money, he would at least try to ensure the criminal was arrested and paid for his crimes. Meanwhile, he continued observing the dynamic between Jennifer and Emily. To his surprise, he began to notice small changes in his wife's behavior. Jennifer was still harsh with Emily, but the extreme humiliations had lessened. Sometimes Richard would catch her watching Emily work with a thoughtful, almost melancholy expression. One day, Jennifer was organizing clothes for donation when she found some items she no longer used. Instead of putting them in the donation pile, she discreetly set them aside. Later, Richard saw that she had left the clothes in the maid's room where Emily slept. When Emily found the clothes, she was touched. They were good quality pieces, some still with tags. Richard watched from a distance as she knocked on the main bedroom door to say thank you. "Mrs. Jennifer, thank you so much for the clothes," Emily said timidly. "You didn't have to." "I didn't have to do anything," Jennifer interrupted coldly. But Richard noticed she couldn't look Emily in the eye. "They were clothes that don't fit me anymore. I'd rather someone use them than leave them in the closet." "Even so, thank you. They're beautiful." Jennifer gave a brief wave and closed the door, but Richard had seen something different in her expression. For the first time, there was a flicker of humanity. The days passed and Richard continued to watch. Small gestures began to appear. Jennifer would leave extra food in the kitchen when Emily worked late. She bought less harsh cleaning products for her skin. Once, Richard even saw her advising Emily on how to clean a delicate surface without hurting her hands. It was as if, slowly, Emily's humanity was awakening Jennifer's dormant humanity. It was during a night of heavy rain that everything changed for good. Richard was in his office when he heard a crash from the garden. He ran to see what had happened and found one of the property's ancient trees had fallen on the kennel where the family's 2 dogs lived. The animals were trapped, barking desperately. The situation was dangerous. The tree was unstable and could collapse completely at any moment. "Oh my God!" shouted Jennifer, who had come running. "Duke and Buddy are under there." Richard started to approach the tree, but Emily came running and grabbed his arm. "Sir, it's too dangerous. The tree could fall completely." "But the dogs—" "I'll go," Emily said with determination. "I'm smaller and lighter. I can get under the tree without putting too much strain on the trunk." "No!" Jennifer exclaimed. "You could get hurt." Richard and Emily looked at Jennifer, surprised. It was the first time she had shown genuine concern for Emily's well-being. "Mrs. Jennifer, I can do it," Emily insisted. "They're just animals, but they're living beings. I can't let them suffer." Before anyone could stop her, Emily crouched down and began to crawl under the fallen tree. The trunk was leaning at a precarious angle, and any sudden movement could make it collapse completely. Richard and Jennifer stood frozen, watching Emily approach the dogs. She spoke to them in a soft, caring voice, calming the animals before trying to pull them out. "Come here, Duke," she murmured. "Easy, boy. Everything is going to be all right." She managed to pull the first dog out. Richard scooped him up in his arms and carried him away. Now only Buddy, the larger of the 2, remained. "Emily, get out of there!" shouted Jennifer. "The tree is giving way." It was true. Richard could hear the sound of wood cracking. At any moment, the trunk could collapse completely. "Almost got him," replied Emily, trying to convince Buddy to move. And then it happened. The tree began to give way for good. Richard saw the scene in slow motion. Emily managing to pull Buddy out, but not having enough time to save herself. Without thinking, Jennifer ran forward and grabbed Emily by the arms, pulling her forcefully out of the tree's path. The 2 women rolled on the rain-soaked ground just seconds before the trunk crashed down exactly where they had been standing. For a few moments, all that could be heard was the falling rain and the women's ragged breathing. Richard ran to them, checking if they were hurt. "Are you both all right?" he asked desperately. Emily and Jennifer were lying on the ground, looking at each other. There was something different in the air, as if a spell had been broken. "Why did you do that?" Emily asked softly, her eyes filled with tears. Jennifer took a long time to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Because I couldn't live with another loss on my conscience." The two women helped each other up, still in the rain. Richard realized that something fundamental had changed between them at that moment. "Emily," said Jennifer, struggling to find the words, I need to apologize to you." "Mrs. Jennifer?" "No, let me speak," Jennifer interrupted. "I have been cruel to you, very cruel, and you don't deserve that." Emily shook her head. "You have your reasons." "No, I don't," Jennifer said firmly. "I have no reason to take out on you the anger I feel towards someone else. You are not your father, just as I am not mine." Richard felt his heart tighten, seeing Jennifer finally acknowledging the injustice she had committed. "I know you are aware of our connection," Jennifer continued. "I know you know why I hated you, or rather, why I thought I hated you." "I understand your pain, Mrs. Jennifer," Emily said gently, "and I accept your anger. If it helps you deal with the loss—" "It doesn't help me," Jennifer exclaimed. "It only makes me a bitter and cruel person." "A person I don't want to be." The two women fell silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of that revelation. "Emily, you saved me today," Jennifer said finally. "Not just physically. You saved me from myself. You made me realize I had become exactly the type of person I despised." "You aren't cruel by nature," Emily replied. "You're just a hurt person trying to deal with a very great pain." Richard watched the scene with a lump in his throat. It was like witnessing the birth of something new and precious between those two women who had been enemies due to circumstances beyond either of their control. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. Jennifer not only stopped humiliating Emily, but began to treat her with respect and even kindness. One morning, Richard found the two of them in the kitchen having coffee together and talking quietly. Jennifer was talking about her father, about what he was like before he met Harold Wilson. "He was the most honest man I ever knew," she was saying. "He never cheated anyone in his life. That's why the betrayal destroyed him so much. He couldn't understand how he had been so deceived." "My father was the same," replied Emily. "He always said that a man's word was more valuable than any contract. When he discovered that Harold had lied to him for years, it was as if his whole world collapsed." "Our fathers were men too good for this world," said Jennifer sadly. "They were," agreed Emily. "But that's not a weakness, it's a strength. They chose to trust even knowing they could be betrayed. That requires courage." Richard stepped away discreetly, allowing the two women to continue their conversation. He was happy to see Jennifer finally processing her grief in a healthy way. It was that same day that he received a call that would change everything. "Mr. Thompson," said the private detective's voice. "I have news about Harold Wilson, good news." Richard felt his heart race. "Tell me." "We found him. He was living in Costa Rica under a false identity. The local authorities arrested him and have already started the extradition process. Furthermore, we managed to locate several bank accounts with money from the frauds." Richard could hardly believe it. "How much money?" "Millions, Mr. Thompson. Of course, it's not everything he stole, but it's a significant amount, enough to repay a good part of the losses for the affected families." When Richard hung up the phone, he stood still for several minutes trying to process the information. After so many years, there was finally justice. He decided to tell Jennifer first. He found her in the living room reading a book. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something important," he said, sitting down beside her. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the seriousness in his tone. "Harold Wilson has been arrested, and they found the money." Jennifer let the book fall to the floor. "What do you mean?" Richard told her everything. His decision to hire detectives, the discovery of Harold's whereabouts, the arrest, the recovered money. "Richard," Jennifer looked at him with disbelief. "Why did you do this?" "Because you both deserve justice, you and Emily. Harold destroyed entire families and was living comfortably with the money he stole. That couldn't continue." Jennifer began to cry. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief, as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up. Jennifer, you need to tell Emily. She has a right to know." Jennifer nodded, wiping away her tears. "You're right. She suffered as much as I did, maybe even more." They found Emily in the garden, pruning the rose bushes. When Jennifer shared the news, Emily was silent for a long moment. "He was really arrested?" she asked finally. "He was," confirmed Richard, "and he will answer for everything he did." "And the money?" "A significant portion was recovered. You will both receive restitution." Emily slowly sat down on the garden bench, as if her legs could no longer support her. "I can't believe it," she murmured, "after all these years." "Emily, you'll be able to rebuild your life," said Jennifer, sitting down beside her. "You'll be able to clear your name, pay off your debts, start over." "And you too, Mrs. Jennifer," replied Emily. "You will finally have peace." "I already have peace," said Jennifer, surprising everyone. "I found it in the last few days talking with you, understanding that the anger was only eating me up inside." Richard watched the two women side by side and realized how similar they were. Both strong, both survivors, both capable of forgiveness and growth. "What will you do now?" he asked them. Jennifer and Emily looked at each other. "I have an idea," said Jennifer slowly. "But I need you both to listen with an open mind. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "I want to create a social project," said Jennifer. "Something to help families who have been through what we went through. People who lost everything to fraud, scams, betrayals." Richard was surprised by the proposal. "That's an interesting idea," he said. "But why now?" "Because I understood something," replied Jennifer, looking at Emily. "The pain we carry can be destructive, like it was for me, or it can be transformative, like it was for Emily. I want to use my experience to help other people choose the path of healing instead of revenge." Emily smiled for the first time in a long while. "Mrs. Jennifer, that's wonderful. I would love to help." "Actually," said Jennifer, "I wanted you to be my partner in this project. Real partners." "Partners?" Emily's eyes widened. "You have the education, the administrative experience, and most importantly, you understand the victim's pain. I have the resources and the contacts. Together, we can make a difference in many people's lives." Richard felt proud of his wife's transformation. The bitter, vengeful woman had become someone willing to turn her pain into purpose. "Jennifer, are you sure about this?" he asked. "Absolutely," she replied firmly. "I spent years consumed by anger. Now I want to use that energy for something constructive." "And what exactly would this project be?" asked Emily. "A support center for victims of financial fraud," explained Jennifer, with growing enthusiasm. "It would offer psychological support, legal guidance, job training, and even interest-free loans to help people get a fresh start." "That's incredible," said Emily, her eyes shining. "So many families could be helped." "And it wouldn't be charity," Jennifer added. "It would be empowerment, giving people the tools to get back on their feet on their own." Richard was impressed with Jennifer's vision. It was as if all the pent-up anger had turned into fuel for something positive. In the following months, the two women worked tirelessly on the project. With the money recovered from Harold Wilson and Richard and Jennifer's own resources, they managed to rent a building in downtown New York and set up the structure. Richard watched fascinated by the partnership that developed between his wife and Emily. Jennifer brought her high society network of contacts, securing donations and support from other wealthy families. Emily used her education to structure the processes and her personal experience to understand the victim's needs. "What will you call the project?" Richard asked one day. "The Fresh Start Foundation," replied Jennifer, "because everyone deserves a second chance." The foundation's opening was emotional. Hundreds of people attended, including several fraud victims who had heard about the project through the press. Richard watched Jennifer and Emily working side by side during the event, welcoming people warmly and explaining the services offered. It was hard to believe that just months before they were practically enemies. "Sorry to interrupt," said an elderly lady approaching Emily. "You're Emily Roberts, aren't you?" Richard recognized the woman. It was Mrs. Eleanor, the lady who had met Emily at the charity gala. "Yes, I am," Emily replied with a smile. "My dear, I am so proud of you," said Mrs. Eleanor with tears in her eyes. "Your father would be very proud too." "Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor." Emily hugged the lady. "That means so much to me." "You turned your pain into something beautiful," the elderly woman continued. "That's what special people do." Richard felt a lump in his throat, watching the scene. Emily had truly transformed her suffering into purpose. In the first 6 months, the Fresh Start Foundation had already helped more than 200 families. The results were impressive. People finding jobs, paying off debts, starting small businesses, regaining their dignity. One afternoon, Richard found Jennifer and Emily talking in the foundation's office. "How are things going here?" he asked. "Wonderful," Jennifer replied. "We just received a donation of $500,000 from a company that wants to support our work. And we have a waiting list of over 100 families asking for help," Emily added. Richard sat in an armchair, observing the two women. It was incredible how they had become true friends. "Can I ask a personal question?" he said. "How do you feel about everything that happened, the way you met, the conflicts, the discovery about the past?" Jennifer and Emily exchanged a look before answering. "I feel grateful," Jennifer said finally. "I know it sounds strange, but I'm grateful that everything happened exactly as it did." "How so?" asked Richard. "If Emily hadn't come to work in our house, I probably would have remained a bitter person forever," Jennifer explained. "She taught me about forgiveness, about turning pain into purpose, about being a better person." "And I'm grateful because I found a family," said Emily. "Not just a job or a business partnership, but people who became fundamental in my life." Richard felt his eyes well up. The journey had been difficult, but the result was more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. "There's one thing I'd like to propose," he said after a moment. "How about we organize a dinner to celebrate the Foundation's first year? Nothing formal, just the three of us, and perhaps some of the people the project has helped." "I'd love that," said Jennifer. "Me too," Emily agreed. The dinner was held in the garden of the mansion where it had all begun. Richard watched the scene, Jennifer and Emily laughing together as they prepared the decorations, former beneficiaries of the foundation helping to serve the guests, children running across the lawn. It was as if that space, which once held only tension and conflict, had transformed into a place of celebration and hope. During dinner, Jennifer stood up to make a toast. "I'd like to toast to second chances," she said, raising her glass. "To the second chance Richard gave me when he discovered who I really was inside. To the second chance Emily gave me when she chose forgiveness over revenge. And to the second chance we are all giving to hundreds of families through our work. And I'd like to toast to the encounters that seem like coincidence but are actually purpose," Emily added. "Sometimes the universe puts people in our lives just when we need to learn something important." Richard raised his glass too. "And I toast to transformation, to the ability we all have to become better people, no matter how many mistakes we've made in the past." All present raised their glasses and toasted together. The sound of the glasses meeting echoed through the garden like a symphony of hope. Later that night, after the guests had left, Richard, Jennifer, and Emily sat in the garden talking. "Do you know what I find most incredible about this whole story?" said Richard. "What?" the two women asked. "How a situation that started with so much pain and anger turned into something so beautiful and productive," he replied. "You two took the worst that life offered and created the best you could give back." "You know what I learned?" said Jennifer. "That anger is like fire. It can destroy everything around it, or it can be controlled to provide warmth and light." "And I learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting," added Emily. "It means choosing to use the memory of the pain to prevent others from going through the same suffering." Richard smiled, observing the two most important women in his life. "And I learned that sometimes the best things are born from the worst moments," he said. "If I hadn't come home that day and seen Jennifer humiliating you, Emily, maybe we would never have discovered the truth about our past." That's true, agreed Jennifer. And if I hadn't been cruel to Emily, maybe I would never have realized how much I had become a bitter person. And if I hadn't accepted working here knowing about our connection, said Emily, maybe I would never have found a way to turn my guilt into something constructive. The three of them were silent for a moment, contemplating the mysterious paths of life. What's the next step for the foundation? Asked Richard. We want to expand to other cities, replied Jennifer. We already have interested parties in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. And we're developing a specific program for young people, added Emily, children of fraud victims who need psychological and educational support. Richard nodded, impressed with the vision of the two. You know you can count on my full support, right? We know, said Jennifer, taking her husband's hand, and that means everything to us. Richard, can I ask you a question? Said Emily. Of course. Why did you decide to help me from the beginning? Even when you didn't know the whole story, you already showed concern for me. Why? Richard thought for a moment before answering. Because I saw in you a dignity that impressed me, he said honestly. Even while being humiliated, you kept your head held high. Even while suffering, you didn't respond with cruelty. That made me realize you were a special person. And it made me realize that I wasn't, added Jennifer quietly. Seeing the way you reacted to my cruelties made me see how small I had become inside. Emily stood up and hugged Jennifer. You didn't become small, she said affectionately. You just got lost for a while. But the important thing is that you found yourself again. Richard watched the two women hug and felt he was witnessing something truly special. It wasn't just friendship, but a sisterhood forged in suffering and cemented in forgiveness. 2 years later, the Fresh Start Foundation had become a national reference in supporting victims of financial fraud. Jennifer and Emily appeared regularly in the press, talking about their work and inspiring other people to turn their pain into purpose. Richard continued to support the foundation, but he had reduced his business activities to dedicate more time to social impact. He discovered he found much more satisfaction helping families get back on their feet than simply making money. One afternoon, he was in his new office at the foundation when he received an unexpected call. Mr. Thompson, said a woman's voice he didn't recognize. My name is Amanda Wilson. I am the daughter of Harold Wilson. Richard almost dropped the phone. What did you say? I know it must be shocking to receive this call, the woman continued, but I need to speak with you, your wife, and Miss Emily. It's about my father and about restitution. Richard was silent for a moment, processing the information. What do you mean by restitution? Mr. Thompson, I recently discovered that my father is a criminal, said Amanda Wilson, her voice choked. My whole life I believed he was a successful businessman. Only now, after his arrest, did I discover the truth about where our money came from. And what does that have to do with us? I want to give it all back, she replied simply. Every single penny my father gave me over the years. I know it won't undo the harm he caused, but it's what I can do to try and repair at least some of the damage. Richard was shocked. Harold Wilson's daughter wanted to return the money she had received from her criminal father. Amanda, you are not responsible for your father's crimes, he said. Maybe not legally, she replied, but morally, I can't live knowing that my education, my home, my entire life were built upon the suffering of other families. I need to do what's right. Richard thought of Emily, who had carried the same feeling of guilt for crimes she didn't commit. Would you like to speak in person? He asked. Very much, replied Amanda, if the ladies are willing to receive me. Richard scheduled a meeting for the following week. When he told Jennifer and Emily about the call, they were both surprised. His daughter wants to return the money, asked Jennifer, incredulous. It seems so, replied Richard. She says she can't live knowing her life was built on other people's suffering. Emily was silent for a long moment. I understand what she's feeling, she said finally. That's exactly how I felt. Do you think we should receive her? Asked Jennifer. I think we should, replied Emily. If she's going through the same thing I went through, maybe we can help her find a better way to deal with the guilt. The following week, Amanda arrived at the foundation. She was a woman of about 30, well-dressed, but with a look of deep sadness on her face. "Thank you so much for having me," she said, clearly nervous. "I know you probably don't have a good impression of anyone with the last name Wilson." "You are not your father," said Emily kindly. "We have nothing against you." Amanda began to cry. "You are so generous," she said, "especially after everything my father did to your families." "Amanda," said Jennifer, "what exactly do you want to do?" "I want to donate all the money I received from my father over the years to your foundation," she replied. "It's a little over $2 million. I know it doesn't make up for even a fraction of what was stolen, but it's all I can offer." Richard, Jennifer, and Emily exchanged looks, surprised by the proposal. "Amanda, that is very generous," said Richard. "But are you sure? That money probably represents your financial security." "What kind of security is that?" she replied. "Security built on the misery of other people? I'd rather start from scratch with a clear conscience." Emily stood up and approached Amanda. "May I hug you?" she asked. Amanda nodded, and Emily hugged her tightly. "You are very brave," whispered Emily. "And you have such integrity. Your father may have done terrible things, but you are choosing a different path." "How did you manage to overcome the anger?" asked Amanda. "How did you turn so much pain into something positive?" "Oh, it wasn't easy," replied Jennifer, "and it wasn't quick either. It took me a long time to understand that the anger was only destroying me from the inside. And it took me a long time to understand that carrying guilt for other people's mistakes doesn't help anyone," added Emily. "What helps is choosing to do things differently." "That's exactly what you're doing," said Richard, "choosing to do things differently." Amanda was silent for a moment, absorbing their words. "May I make a proposal?" she said finally. "Of course," replied Jennifer. "Instead of just donating the money, I would like to work with you. I don't just want to get rid of the weight on my conscience. I want to actively help repair the damage my father caused." Richard looked at Jennifer and Emily, who seemed to be thinking the same thing. "Amanda," said Emily, "what's your educational background?" "Psychology," she replied. "I always wanted to help people, but now I feel I have a very clear purpose." "That would be perfect," said Jennifer. "We were actually looking for a psychologist to expand our services." "Really?" Amanda smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "Very serious," replied Richard. "If you truly want to help, we would love to have you on our team." "But I would like to set one condition," said Emily. "What?" asked Amanda. "That you use half of this money for the foundation and the other half to rebuild your own life," said Emily firmly. "We don't want you to punish yourself unnecessarily. We want you to be happy and use this experience to grow." Amanda began to cry again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "You are incredible people," she said. "How can you be so generous after everything you've been through?" "Because we've discovered that generosity heals both the receiver and the giver," replied Jennifer. And so another person joined the Fresh Start Foundation family. Amanda became the official psychologist for the project and developed a very close relationship with Emily, who became her mentor in the art of turning guilt into purpose. 3 months later, Richard organized a surprise party to celebrate the foundation's 3rd anniversary. Hundreds of people attended: beneficiaries, donors, volunteers, partners. During the party, he watched Jennifer, Emily, and Amanda working together, greeting guests and telling the foundation's story to those who didn't know it. It was incredible how that story, which had begun with so much pain and anger, had transformed into something so beautiful and far-reaching. "Richard," Emily approached him during the party. "Can I show you something?" She led him to a wall in the foundation where hundreds of thank you letters from people who had been helped by the project were displayed. "Read this one," she said, pointing to a specific letter. Richard read aloud. "Dear friends of the Fresh Start Foundation, a year ago I was ready to give up on everything. I had lost my business, my home, my dignity because of a scam. My children were in need, and I saw no way out. When I arrived at the foundation, you didn't just give me money or guidance, you gave me back hope. Today I have a new business, a new home, and most importantly, a new perspective on life. Thank you for teaching me that it's possible to start over. John Miller." Richard felt his eyes well up. "This is my favorite letter," said Emily, because it represents what we truly do here. It's not about money, it's about hope. Emily, I have a question for you, said Richard. What? Do you regret anything? Accepting the job in our home, going through all of that? Emily smiled. I don't regret a thing, she replied without hesitation. Every moment of pain, every humiliation, every tear was worth it if it brought us here. If they hadn't happened, perhaps hundreds of families would still be suffering without help. And if you could change something, maybe I would have arrived a little sooner, she said, laughing, to help Jennifer find peace more quickly. Richard laughed too. Emily had become not just a friend, but a true daughter to him. You know what amazes me most about you, he said. What? Your ability to see purpose in everything, even in suffering. That's a rare gift. I think it was my father who taught me that, replied Emily. He always said it doesn't matter what happens to us, but how we choose to react to what happens. He would be very proud of the woman you've become. I hope so, said Emily with shining eyes. And I hope all the families we've helped feel their pain was worth it when they see their children thriving again. The party continued late into the night. When it finally ended, Richard, Jennifer, Emily, and Amanda stayed at the foundation helping to organize everything. You know what I was thinking? Said Amanda while stacking chairs. What? The others asked. How amazing it is that 4 people who were never supposed to meet ended up becoming a family, she replied. Richard and Jennifer by chance, Emily out of necessity, me out of guilt. And in the end, everything connected perfectly. It wasn't by chance, said Jennifer. It was purpose. Sometimes it takes us a while to understand, but everything has a purpose. And the purpose is always greater than we imagine, added Emily. Richard looked at the 3 most important women in his life and smiled. You know what I think our real purpose is, he said. What? They asked. To prove that it's possible to turn any bad situation into something beautiful if we have enough courage to forgive, grow, and serve others. And that family isn't just about blood, said Jennifer. It's about choice, commitment, and love. And that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we share, added Emily. And that it's never too late for a fresh start, concluded Amanda. The 4 of them fell silent for a moment, absorbing the depth of those truths they had discovered together. Well, now that we've done enough philosophizing, said Richard, laughing, how about we head home? Jennifer, do you still have your grandmother's fudge recipe? Of course, replied Jennifer. Why? Because I think we deserve something sweet after all this work, he said. And because there's nothing better than fudge made with love to celebrate a family that found each other so improbably. I approve of the idea, said Emily, laughing. Me too, agreed Amanda, but only if you teach me the recipe. I want to learn everything about being part of this family. And so the 4 of them went to the mansion where it had all begun, now no longer a place of conflict and pain, but a home full of love, forgiveness, and purpose. While they made fudge in the kitchen, laughing and talking about plans for the foundation's future, Richard realized this was one of the happiest nights of his life, not because everything had worked out, but because he had learned that even the most difficult situations can turn into blessings if we're willing to look beyond the momentary pain and believe in the power of human transformation. Jennifer was no longer the bitter woman who took her anger out on innocents. She had become a compassionate leader dedicated to helping others find hope. Emily was no longer the broken young woman carrying guilt that wasn't hers. She had become a strong woman who used her experience to empower other victims. Amanda was no longer just the daughter of a criminal carrying the weight of her father's sins. She had become a psychologist, dedicated to helping people process trauma and find healing. And he himself was no longer just a successful businessman living a superficial life. He had become a man with purpose, dedicated to making a real difference in people's lives. You know something? Said Richard while stirring the fudge in the pan. I used to think success was about how much money you have in the bank. And now? Asked Jennifer. Now I know that success is about how many lives you can touch in a positive way, he replied. And in that regard, we're millionaires. We're billionaires, corrected Emily, laughing, considering all the lives we're still going to touch through the foundation, and all the families that will rebuild because of your work, added Amanda. Jennifer looked at the 3 most important people in her life, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "Do you know what I wish for the future?" she said. "What?" asked the others. "That our story inspires other people to believe in the possibility of transformation," she replied. "That someone who is going through the same pain we went through hears our story and realizes that there is hope. That someone who is consumed by anger understands that forgiveness liberates the one who forgives more than the one who is forgiven," added Emily. "That someone who is carrying guilt for the mistakes of others learns that they can choose to turn that guilt into purpose," said Amanda Wilson. "And that someone who feels lost in life discovers that it's never too late to start over," finalized Richard. When the fudge was ready, the four of them sat in the garden where it had all begun, eating sweets and watching the stars. "Do you believe in miracles?" Amanda Wilson asked suddenly. "Why do you ask?" said Richard. "Because I think we are living one," she replied. "The probability of all these connections happening, of all of us ending up together working for the same purpose, of so much suffering turning into so much good, that seems like a miracle to me." "Maybe it is," said Jennifer thoughtfully. "Or maybe miracles are just the result of people choosing to do good, even when everything around seems to be going wrong." "I like that definition," said Emily. "Miracles as a consequence of right choices." Richard looked at the three women and smiled. "Then we are all people who make miracles," he said, "and that means we can keep making miracles for the rest of our lives." "Promise?" asked Amanda Wilson, extending her hand. "Promise," replied Jennifer, placing her hand on top of Amanda's. "Promise," said Emily, adding her hand to the other two. "Promise," finalized Richard, completing the circle. And so, under a starry sky in the garden where the story had begun with shouts and humiliation, four people made the promise to continue turning pain into purpose, anger into compassion, and despair into hope. Years later, when they told their story to other people, it would always end the same way, with the certainty that no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always the possibility of a new dawn for those who choose to believe in the power of human transformation. End of story. And now tell us, what did you think of this story of overcoming and forgiveness? Do you believe it's possible to turn pain into purpose like these characters did? Leave your opinion in the comments. Your word is important to us. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting narratives.